Ivy stood at the bedside of a 26-year-old mother of two, while her oxygen saturation dropped from 92 to 61 in the 43 minutes it took the backup generator to run out of diesel. She was conscious the whole time. She knew exactly what was happening. She kept trying to mouth my babies while the monitor screamed, and the last nurse on the floor made the choice to unplug her and run to the NICU because 3 preemies were coding at the same time. That was night 1 of the Texas freeze, 2021. The hospital never actually lost the building. Just the power, the fuel, the supply chain, the staff, the illusion that any of it was optional. That woman is the reason I will never again believe anyone who says hospitals are the safest place in a crisis. Because when hospitals collapse overnight, the things that take lives aren't dramatic explosions or looters with they're quiet, fast, and almost boring in their predictability. And every single nurse who has lived through one knows the exact order they arrive in. The first thing that takes lives is oxygen. Not the lack of ventilators. Not yet. It's the lack of simple, stupid, wall-piped oxygen when the central system loses pressure the moment the main compressors die. In a modern hospital, every single mask, every nasal cannula, every non-rebreather is fed by massive liquid oxygen tanks outside the building. When the grid drops, those tanks keep flowing for maybe 6 to 12 hours on their own pressure. 10 days stop. Suddenly, every COPD patient, every pneumonia case, every post-op kid who just needs 2 liters to keep their sats up turns blue in minutes. Ivy watched a floor full of 70 patients desaturate in perfect synchronization like some kind of horrific ballet. You can have 10,000 vents stacked in the parking lot, and it doesn't matter if there's no O2 to push through them. The fix the government will never tell you. Every welding supply store in America sells medical-grade oxygen bottles right now. No questions asked. A single M-tank with a regulator gives you 72 hours for 1 patient on height. 10 tanks hidden in your garage as a portable ICU for a month. The second killer shows up about 4 hours later. Medication pumps. Every ICU patient, every morphine drip, every insulin infusion, every cardiac pressor is running on a smart pump that needs electricity and talks to the central pharmacy computer. When the power dies and the backup batteries hit 5%, those pumps go into safe mode and stop delivering. A noradrenaline drip on a crashing septic patient cuts off. Blood pressure tanks from 80 systolic to 40 in under 2 minutes. And the heart stops before you can even draw up emergency push dose. Nurses watch grown men die while they literally squeezing the bag of Leveft by hand, trying to keep some flow going. That's when you learn that oral tablets of phenylephrine, or the same pills you can buy at any gas station for nasal congestion, become life-saving pressors when crushed and given sublingual in a collapsing hospital. The third wave is refrigeration. 12 hours in, every medication fridge, every blood bank, every insulin drawer starts climbing toward room temperature. Factor 8 for hemophiliacs, anti-seizure meds, antibiotics that degrade above 77 degrees. All of it turns into expensive placebo. I've seen pharmacists crying while they triage, which dollar, 40,000 vials of monoclonal antibodies. Get the last spots in a cooler full of ice made from melted pediatric 4 bags. The hack that actually worked in Puerto Rico after Maria. Bury the critical meds 6 feet deep in sealed ammo cans. The soil temperature stays 55 degrees. Nurses started doing it with insulin and chemo drugs on day 5 because it was the only thing that worked. And then comes number 4. The one nobody prepping for zombies ever thinks about. Water pressure. Modern hospitals use electric booster pumps for everything. Sterilization, dialysis machines, even the ability to flush toilets on upper floors. When those pumps die, the ORS shut down in minutes. No sterile field, no surgery, no debridement of necrotic tissue. Gangrene patients who could have been saved with a 30-minute amputation start dying of sepsis instead. I watched a trauma surgeon perform an above-knee amputation by headlamp using a cordless sawzall and boiled creek water because the autoclaves were cold. The patient lived. Most didn't. Number 5 arrives around hour 18, right when everyone is too exhausted to think straight. Dialysis. You've got maybe 300 chronic renal patients within 50 miles who need a machine 3 times a week to live. When the grid dies and the diesel runs dry, every single one of them has about 4 to 5 days before fluid overload drowns their lungs or potassium stops their heart. I've seen dialysis nurses on their knees in the parking lot, trying to hand crank the old manual peritoneal dialysis bottles for the lucky few who still had catheters, while the rest were triaged with morphine and told to say goodbye to their families. The cold truth nobody wants to say out loud is that in a full collapse, end-stage renal disease becomes a death sentence faster than gunshot wounds. The only people who survived Puerto Rico and Lebanon long-term were the ones who fled to areas with functioning wells and learned acute peritoneal dialysis using improvised sugar solutions and for tubing. It's brutal, it's medieval, and it works because osmosis doesn't need electricity. Sixth killer creeps in on day 2 or 3, and it's the quietest one of all. Sanitation, without water pressure, without working auto, without bleach that arrived on the truck that never came, hospitals turned into petri dishes. Central lines get infected. Ventilator tubing grows Pseudomonas overnight. Surgical wounds that were clean on day 1 are pouring pus by day 4. I watched Mistisa sweep an entire burn unit in 72 hours because we ran out of sterile gloves and had to reuse the last box. After wiping them with vodka, the head nurse started boiling cloth packs in big soup pots on camp stoves in the courtyard like it was 1918. That's when you realize hand sanitizer is cute until you run out on day 5 and the only thing left is gasoline and prayer. The hack that saved the most lives? Simple, copper pennies taped over door handles, copper tape on bed rails, even copper scrub pads cut into strips and soaked in saline for wound packing. Copper ions rip bacterial cell walls apart on contact. It's why hospitals used brass fixtures before plastic became cheap. In every collapse zone where supplies ran out, the rooms with the most copper had the lowest infection mortality. Science doesn't care that it looks ghetto. And then comes number 7, the one that finally breaks the nurses themselves. Triage. Not the Hollywood version with gunshots and dramatic choices. The real version where you have 1 working ventilator left and 3 kids who all need it equally. Or the oncology ward with 20 patients on IV chemo and only enough potassium chloride to keep 4 of them from arresting. That's when the charge nurse locks the medication room, sits on the floor, and sobs because she has to decide who gets the last dose of seizure medication and who gets comfort care. I've seen doctors walk out and never come back after the first night of real triage. I've seen nurses hide morphine in their scrubs to Mercikill patients they couldn't T-save because watching them suffer was worse than any lawsuit. That's the moment the hospital stops being a place of healing and becomes the place where civilization admits it lost. These are the 7 horsemen that ride in the second the lights go out and never come back on. Oxygen, pumps, refrigeration, water, dialysis, sanitation, and finally, the human soul. Every single one of them has taken more lives in every modern collapse than bullets or bombs combined. And every single one of them is preventable if you stop pretending that 911 or FEMA or someone is going to fix it. Because when hospitals collapse overnight, the nurses don't save the system. They save whoever still has a plan when the system is dead. But here's what keeps me awake at night. What every nurse I know still flinches at when we talk in parking lots years later. Those 7 killers aren't the end. They're just the opening act. Because once the hospital itself becomes the disease, a whole second wave of death starts rolling in that most preppers never even see coming. Number 8 on the real list, the one we never put on the official debrief because it would cause panic, is security collapse. By day 4 or 5, when the diesel is gone and the police radios are dead, the front doors stop being doors and start being suggestions. IV watched family members who were begging for updates on day 1 come back with crowbars and shotguns on day 6 because their loved one was moved to comfort care and they decided that wasn't acceptable. VA seen pharmacy windows smashed from the inside by orderlies who realized their own kids were going to die without seizure meds. The ER becomes a war zone not against outsiders, but against the people who were sitting in the waiting room a week ago. And the nurses. We restuck in the middle holding bedpans and trying to keep people alive with nothing but spit and rage. Number 9 is pediatric dehydration. Adults can go weeks on short rations, but a 2-year-old with rotavirus or just endless diarrhea from bad water loses 10% of body weight in a day and starts seizing by day 2. We ran out of oral rehydration solution in every hospital I know within 96 hours of any major collapse event. The hack that worked in Lebanon and Venezuela is so stupidly simple, it hurts 1 teaspoon salt, 6 teaspoons sugar, 1 liter of boiled water. That ratio saves more kids than every children's hospital in America combined when the supply chain dies. Nurses were writing it on walls with Sharpie because parents couldn't remember under stress. I still have a photo of that wall. It's my phone background. 10 is obstetric hemorrhage. When you have no Pitocin, no misoprostol, no blood bank, a postpartum hemorrhage that would normally be a fix turns into a mother bleeding out on a cot while the OB nurse presses on her uterus so hard her hands cramp and still can. They stop. Italiano, the old school trick that worked in rural Syria when everything was gone. Blow up a condom inside the uterus like a Bakri balloon. Tie it off and it buys you 6 to 12 hours of pressure. Ugly, yes. Effective. 100%. This comes from real-world field survival experience, not formal academic sources. 11 is neonatal hypothermia. When the warmers die and the power's never coming back, preemies drop core temp in minutes. The hack that saved entire NICUs in blacked-out cities. Plastic wrap and hot water bottles. You wrap the baby like a burrito in saran wrap. Skin to skin on mom's chest. And rotate sealed bottles of 100-degree water every 30 minutes. Kangaroo, Care Plus, medieval hot rocks. It works because premature skin has almost no ability to thermoregulate, but direct heat conduction from an adult torso plus radiant barrier beats any isolate when the grid is dead. And the final silent killer, the one that doesn't even make the official statistics because nobody counts it. Staff abandonment. By week 2, when nurses haven't seen their own families in 10 days, when they're eating from vending machines that ran out on day 4, when they rewatching people they've known for years die because there's no saline left to flush a central line, they start walking. Not dramatically, not angrily, they just put their badge on the counter, walk out the ambulance bay, and never come back. The hospital doesn't collapse because of looters or bombs. It collapses because the people keeping it alive finally choose their own children over strangers. And nobody blames them. Not anymore. That's the real overnight collapse. Not the movies. Not the gunfire. Just quiet, relentless. Biological reality stripping away every layer we built to pretend we're not animals. And the craziest part? Every single one of these deaths is preventable right now with knowledge most people call tinfoil hat prepper nonsense. A couple $100 in oxygen bottles, sugar salt packets, copper tape, condoms, and plastic wrap beats $1 million hospital the day the lights go out for good. So if you're still waiting for someone to save you, stop. The nurses won't be there. The doctors won't be there. The government won't be there. But you can be. And when that mother is bleeding out in the dark, or that preemie is turning blue, or that grandfather is gasping his last breath because the oxygen ran dry, you'll either be the person who walks away crying, or the person who pulls the Walmart bag out of the trunk and says, "I've got this. Choose now." Because when hospitals collapse overnight, the only thing that matters is what you decided to learn before the screaming started. Stay human out there. And whatever you do, don't wait for the lights to come back on.